Hello and welcome to Real Hi-Fi Help. Well, one again of these videos here where we're transforming bad gear into good gear. So let's not all be happy or sad about the gear that we have, and just realize that these are tips that will make a lot of bad gear and quite a bit of good gear sound better. So don't feel discouraged or feel that I'm talking bad about the gear that you own. These are methods that I have discovered by myself that that are really good, and some of my friends have also helped me reaching these conclusions here. So yeah, you can own gear, and I'm talking especially about transistor gear that's thin, mechanical, boring, just feels quite empty, and it's not really going in any direction and just pumping sound out in the room. You can make gear like that sound a lot better by almost not using any money at all. So let's dig into this, because this is very exciting, because I'm going to show you the ways where you don't have to use a crazy amount of money getting to that next level. You can use more money and get a higher level of performance than what I'm about to show you here, but it shows you that there's hope, and you don't have to be rich to get a really good sound. So let's just get to it. This is very exciting. So yeah, you want to skip using thousands of dollars, at least to start with, and just try and do these things to start with. So what I did was I took a yoga mat, like you can see here, and I'm guessing this is like $5 in the US, and in Europe it's probably like 10, because in the US you always get normally always get cheaper stuff. But yeah, you can buy this at a hardware store or some place like that, and it's just, it's typically like 3 or 5 meters of this stuff that you can just cut out with the scissor, and you just put it underneath your equipment, and you can have it in 1, 2, 3 layers or whatever you feel. And what it does is that it creates a sophisticated way of vibrations kind of being smoothed out, and it adds some warmth, I would say some glue, where you have the treble, the mid-range, and the bass kind of getting more together. And you could also, in theory, destroy a sound if you're very unlucky. It's very unlikely that you will do this, but if you have a very bouncy floor and you have your speaker right next to your gear, and you then put this underneath your equipment, if you have a very active speaker and a very active floor, it could in theory add too much bass and boost the sound too much. But most likely it won't do that. Most likely it will do the opposite. It will reduce the harsh vibrations and kind of soften it up. So yeah, this helps on a lot of gear. This helps on power boxes, amps, CDs, DACs, whatever. Sometimes it even helps having it underneath a speaker, or instead of you having what's it called, these metal spikes that go directly into a hard floor, if you just like put stuff like this underneath those metal spikes, sometimes it helps just giving that tiny bit more time for the speaker to deliver the sound, so it just sounds more smooth, more warm, more pleasant, more developed. Sometimes it can make a speaker that's very small sound very big, so it's not using too much effort on delivering those sound waves to you. So a very, very good tip for you guys, and it's almost for free. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. You can just cut small pieces out here, small corners, put it underneath your equipment. You can buy them in different colors. You can also just take like a whole sheet, cut like a whole sheet of stuff and put it underneath your equipment if you want to. I find that this in particular works really well with people who have a wooden floor. Also, it could also work a hell of a lot on people with concrete floors. But usually I would say that it does not always give a positive result for people that have lots of carpets all over the place. It usually does not always do that, but sometimes it actually does. And yeah, if it does, please tell me about it in the comments, because I've also been to places where it does make a difference there. So yeah, very, very interesting, very, very good tip for you guys. And we want to reduce microphonics, meaning that we don't want the tubes on our tube gear to react in a way where it's like an antenna sucking in noise, because when you have sound waves bouncing all over the place in your room, it eventually gets into your tubes that acts like antennas. So yeah, if you just hide that gear a bit more away, or if you create like an artificial wall to the left or to the right or wherever, or even if you put some foamy pads underneath it, it also helps reduce the vibrations of the tube. So very good tip for you guys, and that's again basically for free. So that is a very good tip. And you might also want to, like, if you have the gear on the floor, you could put it in a rack, and sometimes it also reduces microphonics. But it could also sometimes enhance it if it's like a very unsolid piece of rack that is very wobbly. So something to think about. Something to think about, indeed. And also, you want to consider that if you have a lot of hard surfaces, especially windows, that you keep this gear in some place where it doesn't receive those waves quite as much. So something for you to play with there. Very very exciting. And again, you can try and just take the gear that you already have, use it in the room that you have. Perhaps it doesn't have a carpet, and when you don't have a carpet, you usually get a sound that bounces off the floor, which makes the sound a lot more like ding 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 ding. It's like functions almost as a booster, that kind of speeds up the sound and perhaps makes it a bit more exciting and vibrant. But it could also make the sound harsh and unstable. So usually when you then put a carpet there, or just parts of carpet on certain pieces of the floor, what you usually get sound-wise is a sound that is just more stable, more earthy. It's just more grounded, reasonable, and you usually get a volume control that is more stable. So just doing this alone can make your amplifier go from like a Macintosh MA6500 to a Macintosh 6900. And that's a big sound difference. This is a thinner sound, where this is a more evolved, bigger brother, settled sound that is more powerful, more stable, and you can get all of that just by adding a carpet, and perhaps putting some blinders up, reducing those reflections. And also, something that I'm just thinking about right now, very important that you guys know this, is that when you have rooms, I'm just going to quickly bounce through this thing. Yeah, when you have rooms, you want chairs here and there, you want furniture. And why is that? Well, because when you have objects in a room, it adds time for the sound waves to kind of settle. If you have too many hard surfaces, if you have too many windows, and if you at the same time have a room that is too small or too big, it will many times suck out the bass, the mid-range, and it will just become very harsh and just kind of go nuts all over the place. So you want to eventually have, if it's possible, even though it looks a bit wrong, you might want to have like a wooden chair here by the windows over here, or like here, what he's done here with the chair, that's a good. All the furniture here, good. Inside walls, so the sound waves bounce off the inside here. That's good for isolating, especially when you have small speakers. You have this like, I would call it a dispersion of waves. And look at the distance between the speakers. That means that you usually would have to be sitting around here for the optimal range of receiving the sound. If you're too far away, that could take a lot of the focus away at the sound and make it a bit messy. So ideally, you know, you want this couch to be like 1.5 meters closer, and you really want the back wall to perhaps be a bit closer, and the side walls, if it's possible, to be closer, because when you don't have at least this furniture and this outside stuff here that boosts the sound, it sucks the sound out and it makes a small speaker seem smaller than it really is. So a lot of things to take into consideration. This is still a very good sound room. It also looks good, good aesthetics and all that. So it's just one of those things you want to consider, you know, small things like this, small chairs over here and here. If this was a naked room and there was no furniture here, and it was just hard surfaces, and it was going out to the side and all over the place, you would have a very empty, soulless sound. So let me just go up again so I don't lose myself in this text. So yeah, you could basically make this here model turn into that, which cost a lot more. So very good tip for you guys. And I made a video about dampening materials, where there's a special material called Scotch 3M removable pads. You can buy it on eBay or some bookstore or supermarket or whatever. They're relatively cheap, only cost a couple of bucks, like I don't know, $3 or I don't know. It's different from country to country, but you can get like a pad thingy like this. And for some people, you only need like one single container like this. And you basically have like a gum substance, but important is that this is a gum substance that is very good at dealing with heat. So even if you have it inside tube equipment, you can still have it there and it being safe, as long as it isn't too close to some few pieces of tube equipment that can get ridiculously hot. And usually what I would do is, I still do this to this day, even though I have some very good gear, because I have a big room, and in order for me to fill that big room up, what I do is, inside of my DAC, inside of my streamer, inside of my amplifier, I have this thing. Believe it or not, I have this thing where I just, you know, cut off a small piece, roll it into a ball, and then I just use it to support my circuit boards some few places. I don't use a lot of it, but I just use a tiny bit of it, and what it does is that it boosts the sound. It makes vibrations on your circuit board become more natural and together, so you get a more organic sound. And maybe you'd say, like, isn't this just like a really bad way of compensating? Yes, it is, if you're dealing with the very, 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 very best gear in the world. And I'm talking about Spectral gear, Negra gear, and top audio note. But even people with audio note, lower level to mid-level audio note gear, can benefit from this, especially if you have a big room. So isn't that fantastic, guys? I'm showing you these things because you don't need to buy a bigger amplifier for your bigger room. You don't need to get a bigger speaker for your bigger room. I'm saving you thousands of dollars here by showing you guys that this can be done. Remember to check out this video here, my dampener video. Also show some other tricks how to make the sound better. But this is a fantastic way of you saving so much money, so you don't have to go like from a 200 watt amplifier to a 500 or 1,000 watt amplifier that costs like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times as much. You've got the tools right here, and I'm telling you guys, I've heard this at a lot of friends' places, and it makes a huge difference. Huge difference. Just make sure, like with everything in life, you want to have a certain type of balance. And you can start off small by just doing it how I describe in this video. Remember, you do it at your own caution. You have to, of course, consult a technician. That's what I recommend. But I haven't done that personally with my equipment. And the only thing that you just basically do is you just keep it away from stuff that sends an electrical signal. So you don't want to touch any print, what do you call it? Printbaner. You don't want to touch any of the circuitry. You don't want to touch any of the components. You're just supporting the power, what do you call it? The circuit boards at the side, so you don't have this violent vibration going on. And it's almost like simulating, you know, cones or vibration feet that costs several thousands of dollars. This is basically that, just a more organic, warm, and natural version of that. Because what is it that these vibration feet do? Well, when you have really good gear, usually you would want to go for a more expensive vibration control. So yeah, once you have really good gear and you have more money, of course, use the vibration feet. They create more clarity, they create more layering, depth, and 3D. But to start with, you can easily just use this Scotch removable pads. And once even if you've put it there next to your circuit boards, if you don't like it, you just take it off. Or if you feel that you have to add more, then you just put it on. So I just have a tiny bit at each corner, and it makes my sound just a lot more boosted, but still in a high quality kind of way, so that the treble and the mid-range don't go nuts and have to work really hard. It kind of moves the bass a bit more down, makes it more solid, and moves the bass a tiny bit more up in the mid-range, and a tiny bit up to the treble, so it just kind of glues everything together, so you don't get this freaky hi-fi show type of empty sound. So very good tip for you guys. I recommend that a lot of people do this, even though they consider themselves having some relatively good gear. I would recommend doing this. But yeah, I mean, once you get into those crazy levels of gear, and I'm talking about Negra Spectral, an Audio Note M6 preamp, or M8, 9, 10, I mean the best preamps in the world, you don't want to do this because they've got vibration control on a much higher level than this, and that's why you don't want to do this. But still, you could still try and do it on that gear, but it would most likely take a tiny bit of the detail away, which you don't want, but it still could compensate for a bad room or whatever conditions you're using. So it's worth a try, and it's easy to remove. So very good tip for you guys. And these are like some of the rooms that look good but have some certain types of traps. So I'm just going to help you guys with that. So we've got the small sound equipment here, glass surfaces, huge area that goes to the side. If this person that had this sound room were just to make a small difference and put perhaps some books right up to about here, all the way there, and then perhaps some books here, it would isolate the sound, making it more rich, organic, stable, and just a lot less harsh, and more in control. So yeah, when you have these spaces here that opens up to another room, or yeah, it's basically the same room, you have a lot of suck out, and it sucks the bass out, sucks the middle tone warmth out, and it just makes the treble go nuts. And yeah, you also you might want to consider having some kind of a soft floor. I can't see what kind of floor this is, but if you have some kind of fabric floor, carpet, it helps reduce bouncy signals, and it can make the sound more stable. So very good tip there. So yeah, I mean, ideally when you have such a big room, you probably want to have some bigger speakers, but you can simulate good speakers by just putting some books to the side here, and then put like books over here, and maybe you also even put the speakers a tiny bit closer to the wall to also boost the sound there. But you have to find the right balance for what you think is correct in your situation. So yeah, again, let's just have a look at this room just quickly. So this is a room that does a lot of good and still a bit of bad. So the big problem I have with this room is basically the windows. This guy is fortunate, he can just shut the windows. It makes the sound a lot less bouncy, a lot less, what's it called, agitated and boosted in a harsh way. So just by putting the curtains here, putting them all the way through here, and here, it can remove a lot of the harshness, make it a lot more natural, warm and pleasant, and suddenly the speakers here can feel as if they're like almost twice as big because of that. But you have to also notice that there is a lot of air going around in the room here, meaning that if you don't have a back wall that's relatively close, and it is not relatively close compared to the size of the speaker, the speaker then has to work a lot more, and it requires some pretty hardcore amplification and signal and all of that from the electrical units here. So I'm just using this as an example, guys, because you want to have your sitting position not around one speaker. You want to have it as central as possible. You want the back wall to usually only be 5 to 7 meters with most speakers from this wall to the back where you're sitting, 5 to 7 meters. You could of course go for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 meters, but most likely with most speakers that will suck a lot of pressure out of the sound, so you will lose a lot of the bass, a lot of the mid-range fullness, and a lot of that high quality treble. It will just have to work too hard on getting the signal to you, and there will be like a problem time-wise getting the signal over to you, because it has to go so far, bounce back, hit something, go to your ear. Whereas when you have a smaller room, if you only had a room that was half as big as this, it would keep so much more bass, so much more pressure, and importantly, so much more focus in the sound, gluing the left and the right channel a lot more together. So if we could have this room, made like to only about half the size or 3/4 of the size, it would help the sound a hell of a lot. And of course, being in the middle of the sofa here would also help a lot. And great tip for you guys, when you have these leather sofas, especially when you have them with these big sides, what happens is that it absorbs vibrations, and your body is kind of like what do you call it, participating, it's participating, yeah, it's participating in the sound. So you're not just listening to something like over there, you're in the sound, you're on the stage, it's more lively. And I tried this at a couple of stores, and it really amazed me. I listened to a Macintosh setup, Macintosh gear, Macintosh speaker, and I listened to it on a stool, and I was like, yeah, it's okay. But then I listened to it on a sofa where the leather sofa was like up to here, and it was totally covering the side and my back and here. And what it did was it almost acted like an extra speaker that was almost underneath me and behind me. So it just felt a lot more effortless. All the sound waves coming from the sound equipment, it just like it was just like a surround experience where it just warms up your body and you feel it, you know. So that's a great tip for you guys, okay? Because, you know, even stuff like this also helps. But leather sofas, believe it or not, leather sofas that have this high side and high back, and probably also a bit flat at the front, it helps you absorb the sound waves with your entire body, and it's such a cool experience. It can make a lot of really bad equipment suddenly sound like oh yeah, wow, did I just get a like an amplifier version that was 1 or 2 models higher? You know, it can make that big a difference. You know, like I said before, you know, the Macintosh MA 6500 going suddenly up to like 6900. Isn't that amazing? Just by changing the sofa. And you know, some of these sofas, you can get them like used off the flea market. And you know, I've been there. You know, some of them aren't that pretty. You can restore them, but you know, I mean, we're talking about sofas that cost like $5, $10, $20, $30 sometimes used. And yeah, sometimes they don't look so good. But hey, you're not using $1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 bucks on a sofa, but it just has that function. It's like buying almost an extra amplifier that you connect to your speakers, so they wake up. So I mean, that's just a great way of especially making gear that is like, I'm not really sure, suddenly perform like, wow, the expensive gear that you never could afford. So isn't that just amazing? Just the sofa doing that by itself, I find that amazing. So yeah, small things like the carpet, you know, carpet here seems perhaps like a stupid idea, but hey, sometimes it actually helps. And if you could have like, I don't know, 3 or 4 of these in the room, suddenly, you know, these erratic, bouncy waves suddenly have more time to settle. And that is a way of creating naturality, of creating integration. And let's just say, for fun's sake, shits and giggles, let's just say that you wanted to have some extra fun. You want the speaker all the way in that corner and all the way in this corner here. So there's a gigantic distance between the two. That could create a very cool sound, but usually that just creates a very big sound. And when you have such a big difference, a huge distance between the speakers, you kind of lose the stereo effect that glues the music together. It comes out in bits and pieces. So again, a thing that you guys wanna really think about. Do you really want to do that? Because I have a bit of that problem going on in my room. I have about 4.5, 5 meters between my speakers, and because my left wall isn't quite there, it kind of goes in. I'm losing some of that stability in the sound, keeping the sound in check. It creates sort of a time difference, slight time difference from the left and right channel. So these are just things that we all have to take into considerations. But it could be something that saves you a lot of money, so you don't have to buy a bigger speaker that then solves that problem. So yeah, let's just try and go on to something else here. Like this here. This could look like a super duper room, and it is to some degree a very awesome room that does a lot of good stuff. There's some good vibration controls here at the sides. You can see they used a lot of money on the interior decorating, and you have the gear over here and so on. But you also have to know that when you have speakers that are like, what is this? I'm guessing 2 meters, 2.5 meters to the back wall, and like 1.5 meters to the side walls, and you don't have a lot on the inside, it creates a sound that is very much like you hear these hi-fi shows where it's like, oh, look at me, zoom, 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 sound effect, isolation, sound effect, ooh. This whole earthy comfortable organic sound kind of disappears, and the whole system goes into kind of a freaky sound mode where it's just out to impress you and just want to show you the detail, the separation, the fastness. And to some degree, this is very cool, but you might find yourself after a while, after having a system like this, thinking, I'm just a bit tired of this, I just want it to settle more, be a bit more comfortable, because then I can suddenly listen to some more esoteric music, perhaps some recordings that aren't optimal, pop recordings, classical recordings, maybe even something like punk music that you don't like to listen to normally. Suddenly that becomes possible for you. Just think about that. Just by moving the speaker like a meter more that way, half a meter more to the side, and then like if you had something that would isolate the sound more on the insides, that would definitely deal with that. Also, know that a lot of speakers, when you just point them straight on, so they're going over here and over there, it has a tendency of making the sound a bit unfocused, a bit unpersonal. So I would generally suggest with a lot of speakers that you have them pointing just outside your shoulders here, probably around here and around here, or perhaps over here and here, but all the way here is usually not a good thing. It creates a almost an emotional disconnect, so you're losing that focus, that stuff that just makes everything make more sense. But also, you also have to consider that even though the windows are over here at the back, if you're sending sound waves over here and it's going into the windows, that could also be a problem. So you might want to consider blinders here, and just like have them closer to the wall, closer here, closer there, and then have them pointing more towards you. It will make the sound so much better. You just wouldn't believe that it's the same speaker. You'll be like, what the hell, did I just get a $50,000 more expensive speaker? And yeah, you can make a lot of speakers sound like they're so much bigger and more expensive and so much better quality just by doing these small things. And I can't see exactly what's going on at the back here. Could be transparent cables or something like that, but cable supporters, you might not think, you might think that's snake oil. And to some degree, for people with cheap systems, you don't really want cable supporters because it's just not an investment that you're really going to be able to hear a lot. Some people might be able to hear that, but I only expect people to have cable supporters when they have an extremely revealing system and they have a floor that's very active where the speaker just goes dong 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 dong. There, when you support the cables, not necessarily by a product that you buy in the store, but perhaps with a thing that you build yourself for like 1/100th of the price, it does make a difference. It does make a difference. So yeah, consider that. You might have a speaker on a very active floor. You might easily want to consider, even if you have perhaps a lower grade system, you might want to consider supporting that cable. It could be with wooden blocks that have foam inside that you make yourself from your local hardware store for only like $10 instead of using perhaps $1,000. These cable supporters cost like $1,000. Isn't that ridiculous? They perhaps look a lot more cool and better and stylish, but you can make them yourself and shape your own sound. That is very, very, very cool. Small detail. I noticed that this guy has a computer. So generally, in regards to streaming, I do not recommend that people have a streamer, because when you have a streamer, and you're running it on let's just say Wi-Fi, it can in one way make the sound better, but it can also in a way destroy the sound. So let me just explain that to you guys. When you activate Wi-Fi on a streamer, what it usually does is that it affects the power delivery to your router that is sending the signal onto your unit. And it sort of functions as a thing that kind of catches the sound and parks it into a slightly more safe, lower level, warm type of sound. So that could be good in theory if you have a very harsh sound and you don't want to listen too much to the detail. But just know that it could make the sound more forgiving and a lower class warmth. But if you deactivate it, it could also make it more honest, more true, more free. So just realize you have the option of trying Wi-Fi on and off on your streamer, and you should definitely give it a go, especially if you have a more sophisticated system. Then you will typically be able to hear a bigger difference. But it also depends a lot on the router that you have and the power supply to that router. It affects it. Everything's relative. We know that with HIFI. But again, just giving you guys a lot of tools that you could use to make your sound better. Because, you know, we don't all want to use millions of dollars on sound equipment where we can get the same sound for only like a tenth of the price or even a lot lower than that. So, yeah, very good tips for you guys. And let's just end with this picture here. And you might look at this room and go like, whoa, this is a very good room. In a way, yeah. He's done a lot of vibration control with these things at the sides. He's got the ability to pull the curtains, create a more dampened sound so it isn't so hyperactive with the windows boosting the all the sound waves going all over the place. So that will create stability having it there. But just know that this is Name Gear and this is Wilson Audio, and especially with Wilson audio speaker, they have a tendency of being a bit PA speaker like, a bit boring, a bit conservative, just not quite communicating on an emotional level compared to a lot of other slightly cheaper alternatives or much cheaper alternatives. That's my personal opinion. You might have a different opinion. I respect that. But the thing I'm seeing here is that we have a big speaker. And typically when you have a big speaker, yes, you want to have it a certain distance from the back wall and the side walls. Typically, the bigger the speaker, the more you want to have it away from the back wall and away from the side wall. But within a certain standard, I would say personally that this would not be ideal, knowing a lot of systems that I've tested, especially Wilson speakers. If you could minimize the distance here, perhaps like a third or half, and then just like put it over there. So you also get a bit of help from that rack, because having that rack relatively close to the speaker will help isolate some of the sound. So all of these units don't have to work so hard. Also know that there's a sound field. Let me just go over to a picture here. There's a whole sound field going like this. If you're too much within that sound field, sound will typically be something that crushes you, that goes past you, that overwhelms you. If you're outside of that sound field, if you have this chair over here, you're typically trying to reach mentally for the sound because it's happening over there. You're not fully participating in the sound. You're not fully there. You're like outside of the range. Like you have to really use a lot of mental energy on figuring out what's going on. So you don't want to be too much on the inside. or the outside. You have to find that perfect place where you want to put yourself. So in a room like this, you just have to be careful that you're not too much within the sound field, because if you're close to a really big speaker in a small room, it's going to overwhelm you, and you're not. It's not going to unlock the lower frequencies of the sound waves. So lower frequencies have to travel at a longer space. So when you want to get down to those really low frequency responses, you typically want a room that is 5 to 10 meters, even though a lot of people say that like 10 hertz only comes when you have like a 20-meter distance. That isn't entirely true, because you also want a lot of the pressure that is built in the room. So I know I'm ranting a lot. Just try and bear with me. You want to keep these speakers as close as possible to the side and to the back wall. And I know that he has to go in and out of this room. That's a problem. We have to address that. We have to figure out, what do we then do? Perhaps the solution is then halfway over there towards the door and the wall. Same with this place. And perhaps we want to consider maybe moving all of this equipment like 20 centimeters more here to help boost the whole 3D imaging that's going on. Perhaps we should not do that, but we should definitely take that into consideration. So those are my considerations about these rooms, and how you generally transform bad gear into good sound. These are the secret weapons, third video covering this subject. So I hope you guys can use this information. This is very valuable information that will help you save a lot of money. And just remember to also watch my other videos. There are a lot of hidden pieces of information in those other videos, where I also have covered this subject. So yeah, remember to like and subscribe, and I will try and then finding new ways of getting you guys to get more out of your money, get more out of your existing equipment, because I'm just mentally tuned into that world, so I have the ability to do that. But I need you guys to support the channel in order for me to be able to do that. So if you could support my channel by clicking like and subscribe, that would help a lot. So yeah, I'm off to work to figure out some new ideas of improving your sound. And this is me logging out. Have a nice day.